Today's mindful moment, packed with insights but designed to fit into your busy life. One deep dive at a time.
What is it that makes you, well, you, ever stop to think about all those layers, family history, past experiences, just life itself that shape who we are?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? And that's really what we're exploring today, looking through parts of Barack Obama's Dreams from My Father.
Right, a story of race and inheritance. These bits give such a window into his formative years.
Exactly. We want to unpack some of those reflections on identity, family, and that whole search for understanding. And maybe, as we talk, listeners can have their own sort of mindful moments, brief pauses for reflection.
I like that. So where do we start? The book ended up being a lot about his mother, didn't it?
It really did. Her influence is profound. He sees her in his daughters, even now. But interestingly, that wasn't the initial plan, exactly.
Oh.
He first thought about writing more broadly about race relations in America, after the Harvard Law Review publicity.
Ah, yes, that must have been huge. First black president of the Harvard Law Review, suddenly he's in the spotlight.
Precisely. He sensed this hunger, as he put it, for any optimistic sign from the racial front. Society was looking for progress.
And he felt he had something to say about that from his unique position.
Yes, that moment kind of fused the personal and the public. His own achievement became symbolic.
But before all that, he delves into his roots, his family. There's that image he paints, really striking, of an old man in a bare room.
Evoking this feeling of untold history. Stories just under the surface.
It makes you think about the hidden narratives in all our families.
Absolutely. And then you have his grandfather, Gramps. His stories sound, well, colorful.
Definitely. Not just facts, but tales. Like holding his friend over a railing in England as a lesson.
Right, a rather extreme lesson about respecting property.
Yeah.
But you hear about his mother's reaction, his father's voice. It brings it to life.
It shows how family stories get passed down, maybe embellished a bit along the way.
And Gramps himself, he had a bit of a wild youth, didn't he?
You could say that. Punching the principal, getting expelled, hopping trains, moonshine.
Not exactly what his wife Toot's parents were hoping for, I imagine.
Probably not. It paints a picture of someone who didn't always follow the rules.
Sets the stage, perhaps, for his later outlook. But things shifted when they moved to Texas. That's when race became much more overt.
Yeah, that advice Gramps got from other salesmen. Chillin'.
Yeah.
About only serving black and Mexican customers after hours.
And Toot's experience, being told never to call the janitor Mr. Reed, Mr.
Finding him weeping silently afterwards is just heartbreaking. Shows the deep personal impact of that prejudice.
It really does. The quiet, dehumanizing effect.
And it seems Toot and Gramps process their past differently. Toot more practical, maybe.
Well, Gramps tended to, let's say, editorialize his history a bit, maybe connecting his own feelings of being an outsider, his absent father, looking different with the larger black struggle.
Like finding meaning by linking his personal pain to something bigger.
It's a powerful impulse, that search for connection and context. Then, unexpectedly, his father arrives in their lives.
After initial hesitation from the grandparents, right? But they came around.
They did. Gramps even had this vision, this grand idea of the family being part of Kennedy's new frontier, Dr. King's dream.
Wow. Linking their personal story to the big movements of the time. Space race, civil rights. That's potent hope.
It really is.
Yeah.
Believing in that possibility, even with all the prejudice they'd seen.
Then the narrative shifts, geographically, to Indonesia, with his mother and stepfather, Lolo.
A completely different world. He describes Lolo's welcome, the landscape, the statue of Hanuman.
The monkey god, yeah. But Lolo called him a strong warrior.
That immersion in a new culture, new myths. It must have been incredibly broadening. Hanuman, a symbol of strength, perhaps resonating with a young boy in a new place.
Their house was simple, apparently. And they had a pet monkey.
Ah, yes. And he learned the language, the customs, played with local kids. Seemed quite adaptable.
Building that cross-cultural understanding early on.
Definitely. But it wasn't all idyllic. He started picking up on the darker side of things.
That the world could be violent, unpredictable, a contrast to his grandparents' Hawaii.
Exactly. And he sensed his awareness worried his mother, who was trying to explain things.
That shows a growing empathy, doesn't it? Aware of her concern.
Lolo, though, offered different advice. More pragmatic.
About needing more sense, taking life as it comes. The sparring story illustrates that, right?
Perfectly. Learning by doing, confronting challenges directly, a useful counterpoint to his mother's idealism.
And his mother was slowly realizing things weren't quite as they seemed in Jakarta. The politics, the corruption.
Yes, through conversations with friends, then checking those stories discreetly with Lolo, a growing disillusionment.
She tried hard to instill her values, though, her Midwestern rational humanist beliefs.
But the reality around them, the poverty, the graft, must have made him a bit skeptical. Those needlepoint virtues, as he called them, felt maybe out of place.
A tough balancing act, transplanting values like that.
Meanwhile, back home, his grandmother Toot offered her own take on his heritage.
Oh, right. The comment about his eyebrows coming from her, but the brains and character from his father.
Subtle reminders of both sides, that complex mix.
And back in Indonesia, his mother was also teaching him about the civil rights movement in the U.S. Mahalia Jackson, Dr. King.
Yes, stories of struggle and resilience. Black schoolchildren overcoming huge odds. Powerful stuff for a young mind.
And then there was a photograph he saw, unspecified, but it gave him this sense of a hidden enemy.
Like a symbol of unseen prejudice, sparking a kind of vigilance.
Soon after, he returned to Hawaii to his grandparents. Quite the reception.
Gramps' comment about the mask being an improvement, a bit blunt.
And they had a new car. Things were changing for them financially.
Which apparently led to some arguments between them, with Toot earning more. Hints of tension there.
Shifting roles, financial power, common family dynamics.
He also mentions a small childhood memory pushing a girl, Coretta, after being teased. Maybe early anxieties about race and fitting in.
Even small things can reflect bigger societal stuff, especially for kids.
Then came the big event. His father's visit to Hawaii.
He describes him physically thinner, using a cane, and the gifts he brought.
The figurines, yes. Lion, elephant, ebony man. Symbolic. But the meeting itself was awkward.
Understandably, they were practically strangers, that sense of distance.
And when Miss Hefty, his teacher, invited his father to speak at school, he was apparently terrified, worried his own stories would be exposed.
But the actual visit went okay.
So surprisingly well, it seems. Maybe challenged some of his fears.
High school, though, brought race into sharper focus. His friendship with Ray was key.
Right. They were among the few black students at Punahou. Shared experiences, Ray's stories, and Ray was apparently a great athlete, too.
Surprising stereotypes, maybe. And their talks often centered on inequality, feeling different.
Formative conversations. Building an understanding, a language for it all.
Then came the direct experiences, the slights, the microaggressions.
Painful moments. Hearing the N-word used casually, the incident with the tennis pro, the elevator.
And the basketball coach. That awful remark, and then trying to explain the difference between black people and niggers.
Just shows how deep those biases ran. Even when someone tries to backtrack, it left a mark.
He talks about it creating a new map of the world, realizing they were always playing on the white man's court.
A profound shift in understanding. Seeing the power dynamics, the struggle for authentic self-expression, the anger it could cause, and how that anger gets labeled.
It's heavy stuff. But then he read Malcolm X's autobiography.
A powerful contrast. That emphasis on self-creation, demanding respect. Though some parts, like expunging white blood, gave him pause.
Understandable given his own identity, but the core message resonated.
The self-determination part, yes. But his biracial background meant he couldn't just adopt it wholesale. It was more nuanced for him.
Frank, the family friend, had a blunt take on Gramps, didn't he? Saying Gramps just couldn't get the black experience.
Using that image of Gramps drinking whiskey and sleeping soundly, while Frank felt he always had to be vigilant. A stark difference in lived reality.
And that party where Regina made a comment, feeling like he was somehow responsible for all racial issues.
That burden of representation, leading him to adopt that defense mechanism, that trick of trying not to care, not to let it hurt.
Moving on to college Occidental. His mother's guilt-tripping sounds familiar, but they joked about it.
A typical parent-child dynamic, maybe amplified by distance, and he apparently only applied because of a girl. Seemed a bit indifferent to the whole college thing initially.
He noticed many black students there weren't focused on revolt, more on regular college life. Sticking together sometimes just to get a break from race being the constant focus.
Right, challenges that simple narrative of universal activism. People cope in different ways.
Then he met Marcus, someone with a really strong, defined black consciousness.
And it made him feel off balance, like he was still figuring things out compared to Marcus's certainty.
There's also that discussion with Regina about Conrad's Heart of Darkness, recognizing the racism, but still finding it instructive.
Yeah, about white perspectives, white biases. A critical reading. extracting insights even from flawed sources.
He connected with Regina, though. Shared backgrounds, stories of Black life. He envied her sense of place, of history.
That feeling of rootedness he felt he lacked. It clearly resonated with his own search.
He gave a speech once at a campus rally. Apparently, it was quite impactful.
But then he decided to stop preaching for Black folks, as he put it. An interesting turn.
Maybe feeling the weight of representation again, or wanting a different kind of engagement.
Perhaps. Then came New York City, and quite the welcome.
Being locked out of his apartment in Spanish Harlem on day one.
Talk about an introduction to the city. He observed the stark divisions there, feeling it was almost natural to the place.
Political talk felt different too, more raw than in college. He felt free, but also aware of these huge social and economic gaps widening.
That sense of things heading towards some point of no return. A growing sociological awareness.
His mother worried about him, didn't she? Becoming a freak.
Yeah, and she insisted they see the film Black Orpheus. It clearly meant a lot to her personally. A shared cultural touchstone she wanted to pass on.
He also reflects on cultural difference, sparked by a story about an Englishman and the Dinka people in Sudan.
Just how vast those differences can be. How hard true understanding is across such different worlds.
And he learned more about his parents' beginnings. His grandfather Hussein's disapproval of the marriage. His father's first marriage complicating things.
Critical family history. The obstacles they faced just to be together. Because of race, because of existing ties.
But his father went ahead with the marriage. He was born. They planned to go to Kenya.
But it got complicated. Hussein's threats, Toot's fears about the Mau Mau rebellion back then, history intersecting with personal lives again.
Then, years later, the news of his father's death. His reaction sounds quite detached.
A vague sense of an opportunity lost.
Mm-hmm.
So just so much unresolved there. The planned trip to Kenya was put off.
And that dream he had of his father in a cold cell, very poignant.
Hints at that lingering grief, that search for connection, maybe processed unconsciously.
He tried reaching out to civil rights groups in New York, established figures.
But got silence. Didn't quite fit in, perhaps. Maybe pushed him to find other ways.
Which led to that year working at a corporate consulting house. A strange fit.
He called it being like a spy behind enemy lines. But he connected with the Black secretaries and Ike, the security guard.
Who told him to just focus on making money? Practical advice from a different perspective.
A dose of reality, maybe, compared to his idealism. Then came the interview for the community organizing job.
Where the focus was on public-private partnerships, a sign of changing times in that field.
Reflects that shift, yeah. More corporate influence in nonprofits.
So on to Chicago. He describes observing the city, feeling a connection through shared memories almost.
And finding familiar ground, comfort in places like Smitty's barbershop. A sense of belonging.
He joined the Developing Communities Project, DCP, met Marty and Will, got into the thick of organizing.
Back to that desire to make a tangible difference. Learning the ropes, the frustrations, the rewards.
Starting in Altgeld Gardens, a segregated housing project neglected, but people kept their homes up with pride.
A microcosm of those bigger issues, poverty, segregation, but also resilience. Marty's focus there was unionization, labor organizing.
Seeing the struggles firsthand really fired him up, didn't it? That desire to tear apart the whole dying landscape.
That visceral reaction to injustice, fuel for the work.
But there were different ideas on how to do the work. Will, for instance, favored more direct action.
Taken to the streets. That meeting near St. Catharines, Will getting emotional about the kids not smiling. Powerful stuff.
Reveals the human cost, the toll it takes.
He also encountered figures like Rafiq al-Shabazz, other groups, saw how fragmented Black organizing could be in Chicago.
Different groups, different agendas, made unified action tricky.
He thought about that lack of cohesion, the potential for bitterness, and how bigger forces, like globalization, impact communities.
He started seeing the wisdom in Marty's approach. Focus on people's actual lives, like the visit to Mrs. Crenshaw showed.
Building trust, understanding real needs, essential for organizing.
He ran into Ruby again. She seemed changed. He offered a book for her son, Kyle, but she left abruptly.
Just a reminder of the personal struggles happening beneath the surface of the community work.
He noted that Black nationalism, apart from the Nation of Islam, wasn't a huge force in the organizing he saw there.
Reflects the diversity of thought within the community, not one single ideology driving everything.
He came to believe real self-esteem wasn't about ideals, but aligning words and actions. embracing the messy details of their shared life.
That's a key insight, isn't it? Authenticity through integrity, facing the complexities.
He reconnected with Ruby, invited her to a meeting. The conversation sounded a bit tense. He even shared a story about a friend's interracial relationship and his own feelings of shame around that once.
Shows those internal conflicts about race and relationships were still present, even in that context.
A huge moment must have been meeting his father's sister, Oma, who visited Chicago.
Absolutely. She gave him the Kenyan side of the story,
Mm.
about their father's struggles after returning home, his isolation, his bitterness.
It sounds like he had trouble adjusting. The reality didn't match the promise he felt he had.
Alma suggested that, yeah. Difficulty reconciling his earlier life with the circumstances he found himself in. The weight of unfulfilled potential.
That's a deeply human story, the gap between aspiration and reality.
Mm-hmm. He also saw the opening of the M-Meet Center, a community project, but felt some of the political involvement was a bit superficial,
Photo ops over deep engagement.
potentially. He had a talk with Will around that, expressing his own frustrations. Will offered some encouragement,
That kind of validation is crucial in that work.
for sure. He also visited Dr. Collier's child care center in Altgeld, got insights into the challenges young mothers faced.
And met Linda and Bernadette Lowry, who held on to dreams of a better life, symbolized by better homes and gardens clippings.
Powerful examples of resilience and hope, even in tough circumstances.
And then Sadie stepped up about the asbestos issue in Altgeld.
Right. Initially, people were hesitant, but she pushed, became the spokesperson, and they actually got results. A real win for community empowerment. Shows what collective action, sparked by one person, can achieve.
But then a conversation with young Kyle brought things back down to earth. His belief that a black man couldn't be an Air Force pilot.
Sobering. The impact of internalized racism, limiting horizons like that, just devastating.
He tried to get churches involved in tutoring, but hit resistance, partly because some educators there sent their own kids to private schools.
Highlights the complexities within the community itself. Competing interests, existing inequalities, creating barriers.
Meeting Asante, who had positive memories of Kenya, spurred Obama's own reflections on his heritage. And hearing Johnny talk about his father's troubles.
More layers to the experiences of young black men. He encouraged Johnny to acknowledge his father's role in his life.
He started developing a proposal for a youth counseling network with Asante and Dr. Collier, a concrete step.
Which led him to decide to visit his brother, Roy, in D.C. The initial phone call felt a bit off.
Yeah, artificial enthusiasm and unease.
Yeah.
And the visit itself confirmed that feeling.
Seems so. A sense of distance, Roy making unrealistic claims. Obama felt he might be in some kind of trouble.
Worrying. It highlights those complex family dynamics again.
Then that late-night encounter with some young guys in a car made him think about different paths in life. Kyle, Roy, Johnny. How easily things could go one way or another.
The precariousness of it all, especially in tough environments.
The conversation back at Smitty's barbershop was pivotal. Johnny expressed real pride in Obama's success.
Which, maybe unexpectedly, made Obama question his own motives, his self-trust.
Exactly. That external validation triggered deep introspection, and that's what finally pushed him. He decided to go to Kenya, to see Oma, to connect.
It feels like a culmination of so much searching.
Definitely. He reflected then on how his experience of race, his ability to navigate or escape parts of it, was different from Frank's, or the old man's, or even Roy's.
Acknowledging the progress made by the civil rights movement, the greater opportunities he had.
Yes, while still seeing the enduring weight of history and inequality. And he realized something else.
What was that?
That real healing, deep change, needed more than just self-belief. It needed a kind of faith, a foundation he felt he lacked.
A spiritual grounding.
Something like that. Which drew him to Reverend Jeremiah Wright and Trinity Church. Wright seemed able to hold all the contradictions, the diversity of black experience.
That sounds like what he was searching for. Then Harold Washington, Chicago's first black mayor, died suddenly.
A huge blow to the city, especially the black community. A moment of collective grief. He also mentioned some friction with Mary, a colleague, about their different work paces.
Normal tensions in collaborative work. But Reverend Wright's sermon, that sounds like a key moment.
Absolutely. That imagery, the bruised harpist on a world of strife, still offering hope, it resonated deeply.
And the small gesture during the sermon, the boy offering him a tissue while he cried.
A moment of simple human connection. Deeply affecting. For listeners interested in exploring similar themes through literature, our AI audiobook analysis YouTube channel, Mindful Moments, and our podcasts might offer some interesting perspectives.
It really is an incredible tapestry woven through these experiences, this whole complex dance of identity, searching for belonging, searching for meaning.
It truly is. And reflecting on narratives like this, the forces that shape us, it tells us so much about the human condition itself.
It illuminates that universal journey dealing with family legacy, figuring out who you are, trying to understand a world that's both beautiful and incredibly difficult.
Well said.
So if this discussion sparks some mindful moments for you, please consider subscribing to our show for more explorations like this.
And share it with others who might find it valuable. You can also find a link to purchase Dreams from My Father. In the show notes, it supports the author and lets you dive into the full story.
Finally, something to think about. What untold stories, what hidden histories might exist in your own life, your own family, your community?
And perhaps, how critically do we examine the stories we tell ourselves and the stories the world tells us?